When I go to a festival and I listen to a band playing through a line array, and you hear the drums, you know, the drummer does a roll round the toms and it goes click, 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 like that. There's no tone. You know, what we want to hear is bling, 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 bling. You know, that's what a drum kit should sound like. That's what you can do with Funktion One.
We started Turbo Sound in 1977, John and myself, and we had great success with the TMS range. I think the TMS3 was the dominant loudspeaker cabinet for most of the 80s.
With Turbo Sound, we were very strong in the live area, and we did sound for the Pink Floyd and you know, Roger Waters' solo tour, which I mixed. Status Quo, Jackson Browne, Santana, all those big bands.
When Turbo Sound was sold in, I think it was the late 80s, I was part of the legal team that, I think I was involved in that transaction.
We had to reinvent ourselves, and that is what we've done. We reinvented as Funktion One. We didn't really release any products till probably about 2000. We spent some time coming up with new technology. It was rather good because we were in charge of ourselves and we were able to pursue exactly as we wished.
My background is a sound engineer, a live sound, yeah, since 1970s.
Myself, I've been involved in the music industry since actually probably 1969. I started designing cabinets in 1971. Because it became very obvious that there wasn't any PAs to speak of. Certainly not musical PAs. There was always been public address with big horns for voices, but at that time there was no real full range PAs, so we set about building. Mm-hmm. And in that time, I guess I've taught myself. My name is Tony Andrews.
My name's Anne Andrews.
It's very much a family business.
I do quite a lot of different things.
John looks after a lot of questions that people have around the world about settings.
I like to make things, so I like to be involved in the practical side of research, making new parts for drivers or speakers.
But the most important person in the company is Anne, my wife.
My role in the business is I'm finance director. I also take care of some of the marketing duties and also the direction of the business as well. So I've got many hats, really.
I'm involved in specifying systems for clubs and concerts. That is assembling the different products to make a system that works.
I'm technical director of Funktion One. I design loudspeakers.
I'm honoured to work with such a talented bunch of engineers, you know, Tony and John, both legends, and it's great. They're tireless, and it doesn't matter. Anybody can phone up any time of the day. You know, they take care. They want to pass on the information. They just live for it. What is Funktion One? Let me think about it.
It's actually in southern England, not far from Gatwick. We've got about 12,000 square feet. It's not so big. There's about 16 people altogether.
We're not a company that's driven by marketing. I think that's pretty obvious to most people. We're a company driven by passion for sound.
Funktion One means a special kind of approach towards audio.
We can make anything from scratch, pretty much. So if there's a new cabinet, we make it there, we modify it until it's right. Once it's made, it gets drawn and sent out for production, and it comes back to us sprayed with paint.
We really try to make the speakers as true as possible and to create the best illusion of audio as possible. I think audio is an illusion. It should approach reality.
So we do the fitting of the flying, obviously the speakers, the waveguides, everything. So everything comes to Function One in Surrey, and that's where we do all the quality control. We do all the final assembly and checking and shipping to wherever it needs to go. I think we're in certainly on every continent. We're in nearly every country in the world now.
What is Function One? Well, I think it's the best loudspeaker company on the planet.
Principles, I guess purity of audio.
To do as little as possible correction to a speaker.
We spend time getting the driver and enclosure or waveguide combination as correct as possible.
To have a speaker that can be used without any EQ, without DSP.
A loudspeaker and an enclosure and a horn is a system, and everything has to be in balance. And we try to find those balances. We don't use corrective EQ. To me, that's sort of mission of failure, actually. In the beginning when I started, there wasn't equalizer, it certainly wasn't DSP, and EQ had only just been invented, and nobody even thought about taking a loudspeaker and then adding, corrective EQ to it. You had to get your speaker right, and I still think that's the right approach.
If you apply system EQ to a loudspeaker system, what you do is you apply a characteristic to everything that comes through that system. So if you're mixing a show, then every channel of your mix will have that characteristic that EQ gives. So what happens is that every part of your mix tends to come from the same place. It sounds like it comes from the same place. If you can leave the system very flat and then mix with your mixing desk, then each correction that you do is specific to that channel, and things can come from different places and your mix has more space.
We also work on high efficiency. If you get a good conversion of the amplifier energy to acoustic output, then you don't have to push it so hard, distortion levels stay low, use less electricity. I can't understand why anybody would think anything else, to be honest. It's so obvious that you've got to get a good conversion. Your typical loudspeaker is only about, the ones in your living room are about 2 or 3% efficient, that's all. And with good horn loading, you can get to maybe 30% efficiency. But it's a bit like when you take an engine and you make it very high performance, it starts to get wild and it's not so easy to control. So I think a lot of people don't do horn-loaded systems because they're actually they are wild, and it's hard to get a flat response or an even response, shall we say. Flat's impossible. I don't know anything that's ever been flat. So I guess those are my principles.
Something that I'm always trying to hear from speakers is that the speaker isn't there. The sound should be between me and the speakers or anywhere else, but the sound shouldn't appear to come from the speaker. We
Firmly rooted in the idea that it's the people on the dance floor or the people in the concert room who are the important ones. So we do this to make their enjoyment as much as possible. Don't drink the marketing Kool-Aid, We don't overmarket our stuff and we don't pretend anything that isn't. I mean, good quality audio is about truth, is about high fidelity, and we try to maintain that in our dealings and in our equipment.
I think the biggest difference between Function One and all the other speaker manufacturers is that we use cone drivers in the mid-range.
Which means that compression drivers, which they are efficient, but they're usually quite unpleasant or a lot of distortion. So if you can push the crossover point to 5 kilohertz, they become like a high frequency unit only or a tweeter. They're much better behaved. And we can do that because we have this cone mid-range technology that we've been developing since about 1977.
It has that effect of bringing sound towards you. The sound comes out of the speaker towards you.
The other thing is that our bass tends to be horn-loaded bass. Many of these things we've achieved patents for because of their novelty value. And the bass is straight horn-loaded. I've heard systems recently where the music was almost undanceable because the bass just seemed to be so not part of the rest of the sound.
You have to feel part of the music. You know, you don't want to dance and feel the music's somewhere over there. It's got to be here. It's got to be an extension of you and part of you. You've got to feel emotionally connected.
So I think that's another big difference, is that our bass merges seamlessly with the mid-range. It's all one thing, and there's no reverse waves being used that give you a strange phase and cancellation results.
Try Function 1 and listen for the reality that you hear in the sound. You will hear the difference in your microphones, you will hear the difference when you EQ, you'll hear a difference when you push a fader. Everything is more sensitive. It's like driving a Ferrari, you know, you turn the wheel like that and you go around a corner. There's no, it is, you know, it is responsive. There you go, that's a good word. It's very responsive and very transparent.
The speakers are even and dynamically the same across the spectrum. They can do any kind of music at all. They excel at all kinds of music. Everything from vocals to classical, dance, rock and roll, doesn't matter. It's complete rubbish to say one system is better for another. Maybe the problems are not so noticeable with certain kinds of music, but I think we've got our stuff to a point where it can do anything, no problem at all. In the first Gulf War, when they had the stealth bombers, the facets were reflecting the radar in a way that wasn't being picked up by, you know, there was no direct reflection. So the facets and on the axe head help with the dispersion and the loading. The mid-range technology, you know, it requires a form, so the form follows the function. And in fact, it looks like it does because that's the shape that works.
We just always had a problem with black boxes.
I'm not a fan of black. I don't do darkness. And purple's always been in my roots. Goes back to Jimi Hendrix and Purple Haze.
I suppose it's, you know, to a certain extent, it's a spiritual thing, really. It's colour rather than darkness.
Distinctive. It's not black. It's still dark. It doesn't get in the way, but it gives it a character. And you know, the speakers are an expression. They're an expression of my gift to the world, if you like, or my contribution to the well-being of the planet, I hope.
I think everybody has an opinion about sound and what they like, and I think audiences that you know, they might not be able to talk about it, about what it is and explain it, but they have an opinion about it. They know whether they're having a good time or not. They know whether the sound's good or not. They know whether it's hurting them. They know. So I think it's wrong to say just because people are not in this business that they can't tell the difference between a good sound and a bad sound.
I don't think I hear any difference than other people. I think that my sensitivity may be there. But what I think is different is the fact that I've spent 40 years training my brain to understand what my ears are telling it.
When you practice listening, then you learn to separate things. But I think, no, I don't think I hear differently.
I do it. My reason for doing it is I have a great joy in the experience of music, especially with community of people, and I just wish to share that. And for me, a big part of it is to have the sound as clean and clear and accessible to the fine qualities of the human hearing system.